Hi, Successfuls. Kelly here. Are you an introvert or an extrovert? Or, like us, are you somewhere in between? In this episode, we're talking about an amazing book for introverted solopreneurs like us, A Quiet Life in 7 Steps by Susan Cain. This is the Success Through Community podcast.
So, Kelly, I don't know if you know this about me. Most people think it's a lie, but I am a introvert. Very, very much so. An introvert.
I
Um,
believe it only because I am too, and no one ever believes me either. So I will believe
right?
you. Yes.
Yeah. So just because you're outgoing or loud and obnoxious, like I really have the potential to be, it doesn't mean I'm an extroverted person. So when I grabbed the book that we're talking about today, I was quite shocked at how much it resonated with me. It was a breath of fresh air for me. So yeah, it really this book hit home. It did. So I'm really glad that it was one of those books that just kind of it came to me at the right time, and now's the time. So without further ado, I suppose I should tell you what book we're talking about. I read A Quiet Life in 7 Steps by Susan Cain. And like I said, this book was a breath of fresh air. I listened to it via Audible because it is another Audible original. I gotta stop choosing these books. Sorry, listeners, but just try an Audible. It's totally worth it. But listening to it, she narrated it. And I know we talk about this all the time, but for this, she was perfect for it because she's very calming and her demeanor was very lovely. And I really felt her intention of quiet, like deep in my soul. And I really loved it. And as you and a lot of our listeners and some followers know, my life has been hectic and chaotic for the past, I would say, year. It's just kind of been flipped on its head. And this book kind of helped me realize that that's okay and helped me realize that I can live a quiet life. So, along with her narrating the book, which, like I said, I thought she was amazing with it, anytime she was telling someone else's story or sharing someone else's experience that they shared with her, she actually reached out to that person and they told it in their voice. So they read their own letters that they sent her, almost like an interview type experience where they explained their story. So hearing from both the writer of this book as a narrator and from those she mentions directly in the book and their stories, I found it had a much greater impact than if I had just read this book or if just some narrator read the book. Does that make sense?
Totally. And it's actually familiar to me in that. So I think I don't think I've ever talked about this in any public forum or whatever, but my family is friends with Marion Ross and her family.
Mhm.
And she, a couple years back, had a memoir or autobiography that she co-wrote. I'm not exactly sure this the details on that, but she did an audio version of it. And same thing when a chapter was about a particular person in her life, including my aunt, they
Right.
narrated their own chapter.
I love that.
Which is
And
kind
I've
of a
never heard that
cool
before.
concept. Yeah, hadn't either, and I thought that was really kind of a cool concept because it just brought so many different, like, textures to the story, and I don't know, it's
So
just
many
very interesting.
levels.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
impactful. And
Mhm.
I'm just gonna, before we move on, I just want to tell our listeners because not everybody is as aged and vintage as we are, who Marion Ross
Hey,
is.
watch it.
Happy Days, she was mom. I can't remember her name on Happy Days,
Mrs.
but she was the
C,
mom.
Mrs. Cunningham,
Yeah,
yes.
Mrs.
And
Cunningham,
many
that's
other
it.
things, but that's what most
But
people would
yeah,
recognize her from, yeah.
that was her. Yeah, that's how you'd recognize her. And I still think it's like one of the coolest things. I'm like 3 degrees separated from Mrs. Anyways, so yeah, right. But oh, from the fonts. Okay. Anyway, I digress.
Oh, you're
Yes.
funny.
Having those people tell their own stories, listening, I'm gonna have to listen to her biography now because I think it's impactful and it really hit me. I really, really enjoyed it because of that. And I found that the book to be more than just a book, it was almost like a guide. It's like a lifeline for introverts who, like me, have spent years trying to fit in to that extroverted life that we are supposed to be in society, right?
Oh, you know how I
So
feel about the supposed to be's and the shoulds.
exactly. But see, for me, I have lived my whole life of I would have rather done this instead of that. Not my whole life. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but a lot of times I always felt that I needed to be that extrovert. I needed to put on that face, that mask in order to succeed, in order to
Yeah.
be liked, in order to be happy. Because I thought that these are, you need this, and that to be happy. And it's just, I don't know if it's just I'm getting older, I'm getting more patient, or I'm just at that point in my existence, that soulful journey, I guess I'm on now, to find that it's okay. I don't need to do anything. I just need to be me. And this book is a blessing for introverts like me, for people who always felt that one way on the inside and had to put on a front on the outside. You know what I mean? Like I said, spending years trying to fit into that extroverted kind of mold that they insist. We talked about this last week on super fans, where I kind of took a step back when he was talking about being in social media and being out there. I'm like, I'm not putting myself out there to make a super fan. It's just not who I am. And
Right.
I'm comfortable with that now. And Pat Flynn was like, you don't have to. And it made me breathe a sigh of relief. And this book is that sigh of relief, just tenfold, I guess.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the book in itself is 7 chapters. It is not a hard or long read by any means. It is intriguing, and I found it a little bit life altering. So basically, each chapter is a question, a discussion, and an exercise on how you can get to a quiet life in 7 steps or 7 questions. Now, one thing I found kind of cute, but kind of annoying, 2 things actually I found. One, at the beginning of the book, because I listened to it via audio, she does an explanation of what the book's. Hi, you're listening to. So they kind of do it in kind of a podcast style kind of narration. You're listening to like Quiet Life in 7 Steps by Susan Cain, where we are going to talk about. And she says in the first, I think, 2 or 3 chapters of the intro, we're going to discuss 17 questions when really there's only 7. But then,
What? You're like,
around her,
wait, how many chapters are in this book?
yeah, exactly. So it's like, okay, I better pay close attention because they're going. But yeah, so there's that little bit of an error, and that's okay because done is better than perfect. We all know
Is this
it's
a
not.
self-published? Not no shade at all. Just curious. Is it a self-published?
No, it's an Audible original. It's actually published by Audible, as far as I know.
Huh.
Okay. Audible originals, I looked into this after we had a conversation about it before.
Yeah.
Audible originals are either written specifically for and recorded for Audible. So there might be a paper copy out there. I tried to find one because I do want a paper copy of this book. There might be a paper copy out there, but it's not likely because it was specifically made for Audible,
But
which I think
didn't this come up because we were talking about Superfans, which is also an Audible original, but definitely has a paperback? Isn't that where this
possibly.
came up?
Yeah.
So there could
Yeah.
be a paperback, but you just think she's not doing the printing.
I have not found one for this one. No.
Huh. Interesting. Okay.
Sorry, folks. Sorry. Sorry, folks. So yeah, 7 questions. So I'm just going to kind of cover each one really quick and short, a little deeper into one that hit home. And just to let you know, again, after every chapter, there is an exercise, and they're really good. They're really self-reflecting, and they really lead into the next chapter seemingly and smoothly, because I found it great that she did that, because she'd be like, in the last chapter we talked about this. Now you're gonna think about it and do this. I'm like, okay. So I found it kind of great. Okay, so the first one is just accepting silence. And for me, that's a big one, because she kicks things off by telling you to flip the script on solitude. Instead of thinking that you're lonely and how being alone is a bad thing, she wants you to kind of look at it as a place of creativity and a place for growth. I never thought myself as lonely, but I do feel alone sometimes. And a lot of people are like that. And it's one of those things where after reading this book, when I feel alone, I kind of now think that this is a good time for me to be with me, or for someone of a spiritual nature to be with God, to kind of have their moment, to not be alone anymore, just to kind of find their inner happiness. And then the second chapter is about This is what I'm going to dig a little further in. It's about discovering your silent calling. So, this resonated with me because she talks about finding your quiet passion, like those hobbies and interests that really make your heart sing, but don't really necessarily involve a crowd. And it could be writing or painting or just reading a book, whatever it is, whatever that you love to do alone as an introvert, then do it. It's okay if you don't want to be out there amongst the crowds and throwing yourself out on social media and being out there. It's okay if you don't want to be a leader. I mean, we always talk about being a leader in your industry, and that is a phrase that is thrown around a lot in the online business world. Be a leader in your industry. Show everyone you're a leader. And you know what? It's okay if you don't want to be a leader. You just need to be you. And if you're knowledgeable, that's all going to come out, right? She does touch on the fact that sometimes you kind of fall into leadership, and that's okay. Because some of us start with I don't want to lead. I don't want the responsibility. I don't want to be the center of attention. Um, it's one of those things where eventually, because we fall into it, if you own your quietness and you own your introversion, is that a word? Your
It
introverted,
works for me. I tracked with you.
then you can be a leader without having to be the center of attention. Like you can rule the world without having to be an extrovert, is more or less what she's saying.
Yeah,
And
I
there's a
totally agree with that. I mean, I think
yeah.
there's this, I don't know, perception that being a leader means that you're necessarily up front or on stage in some way.
Hmm.
But I think honestly, like every single person is a leader to someone. I think
Absolutely.
if you look at it from that point of view instead of,
Mhm.
telling yourself you have to be center of attention or front and center or whatever in order to be a leader, like I know a ton of introverts that are amazing leaders, I don't think
Yeah.
yeah, I like that she's saying that because it definitely
Yeah.
is a misconception that you have to be this,
Yeah.
extroverted whatever to be a
E-
leader.
exactly. And you don't have to be extroverted and you don't have to be a leader to be successful. Like you can be, what you have to do is just be you. Own your own strengths and work with your own strengths. And if your strength is quietness, which is what she's kind of trying to get to here, then you can most definitely be successful. There's a quote in the, or not a quote, it's a poem in the book. Now, I actually went and I looked up this poet. So the poet is Victoria Erickson. And I swear, Kelly, I'm gonna get this poem tattooed on my arm or painted on my wall or something. I'm just gonna read it. So the poem, what's the name of it? It's called Some of Us, and it's by Victoria Erickson. And it is, some of us don't want to be tough alpha leaders. Some of us just want to write and wander the garden and breathe in the sky and nourish and nurture and quietly create new pathways and live our lives as our art, to know the earth as poetry. And I'm gonna cry. Like that that poem
Oh, I like it
just
though.
it
Yeah.
hit home for me. Like it really did hit home for me because yeah, I want to in my business, for example, I'm so gonna cry. A silly book making me cry.
That means it's good. It
I
made you feel.
yeah,
That's the point.
and that's why I'm like this book hit me right at the right time.
Yeah.
I want to, with my business, I want to help others succeed. I want others to become the millionaires that they want to be. I want to sit on the sidelines and I want to be a slughorn without all the crazy perks professor gets. But you know what I mean? Like I just kind of want
Oh,
to do
the
that. And
slug club, is that what you meant?
yeah, yeah.
I
No, I
love
want to
you.
be Professor Slughorn, giving everybody the path, showing them
Yes.
the way,
Oh, I
helping
love
them
it.
get there, and being behind the scenes and letting them know she helped me. And that's all I need is I just need to see people succeed and I'm going to be very happy. So that's me nurturing in my garden and creating those pathways and just living my life as art. And it hit home because I need that quiet and to know that it's doable without having to put myself out there. Like, I find the podcast makes me very vulnerable. And every time we're going to record, I love hanging out and having conversations with you, but I'm like, they're gonna listen to me. Yeah. It's one of those things where this book is, yeah, I'm rambling. I apologize. So that's chapter 2. Chapter 3 is about relationships, and it's about quality over quantity in your friendships, right? She highlights how an introvert can really build a deep, meaningful connection through empathy and vulnerability and active listening and all of those things that we try to be as good humans and we hope others are, but isn't always easy when you want to be the center of attention or you think you need to be the center of attention. It's about having those few close friends who really get you rather than that huge network. And I think that equates to business as well. It's about making those connections and not worrying about putting yourself out there, not worrying about being front and center all the time, and actually more building that connection and building those strong, intimate relationships with your clients. And that's kind of how I took that one, and I loved it.
It's
Four, it's
kind of a different take on superfans, yeah. I mean,
it is.
in a
It
way.
absolutely is.
Yeah.
Because it's all about that handshake, right? And when you are making that handshake, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, she's saying as an introvert, just it's easier if you own it as an introvert instead of trying to make that handshake as an extrovert because you think you need to. Because if you own your solace and your quiet and you own the empathy and the vulnerability that you have, it's so much easier for you to focus on the one in front of you. When all of that garbage is out of your head, it's so much easier to just build a connection. And the next chapter is about social circumstances, and she points out exactly what I was just kind of talking about, that social anxiety, the discomfort, the always kind of forcing yourself to be out there. But when you own your quietness, when you're living that quiet life, you don't feel that anxiety anymore. And that just kind of it clicked with me because if I am stressing out about going to a party because I just don't want to mingle, I don't want to talk to anybody, I don't want anyone to ask me what's going on with my life because I don't want to turn into a chaotic therapy session. So what am I doing? I am just building anxiety, and it's just anxiety on top of anxiety and just causing more and more stress, all just to go out with my husband to a party. When really, if I own the fact that I don't need to tell everybody my life story, I can be the quiet person I am. I don't need to put on this brave face. I can go there and say, you know what, things are kind of iffy and crazy right now, but that's okay. I'm getting through and carry on. Then it takes away that anxiety of going out. It takes
Yeah.
away of putting the anxiety of being in those situations. And I thought, I mean, this is common sense, right? Things that we're kind of taught, but to get it all piled up in one 2.5 hour little listen, it was like a therapy session. It was great. And then the next chapter is again just taking pride in who you are. So she talks about it. Own your values, own your authentic self, own your quietness, own your introvertness, and don't suppress them. Just be. And then she kind of talks into being a silent leader is what she calls it. So this is when that leadership kind of comes out as an introvert, where you can still be a leader, but you can lead with that quiet influence and be thoughtful in your decision making and lead by example is the big thing she uses, because practical advice is always important when you're a leader, right? So you don't have to be everything to everyone all the time. And that's when she kind of points that out. And the final thing that she really talks about in this book is leading a purpose driven life, which brings us to the title, right? Leading a quiet life. Now, by that, she does not mean, a quiet place, no music, anything like that. She just means lining your life and what you do every day and aligning it with your values and your passions. And she urges you to pursue your dreams with courage and conviction and embracing your quiet nature as inspiration and embracing it as a strength. I want to touch base here too in my research about who she is and how she knows all this. Like, how is she this smart? I guess is what I'm looking for,
Yeah.
because
Where's
how
the
did she
wisdom
connect with me?
coming from? Yeah.
Yeah, how did she connect with me on such a level? And I came across a TED Talk she did. And I wrote a blog post about this TED Talk because, again, I cried. I full on ugly cried listening to this TED Talk.
Mm.
S- I can't remember the name of it, but I will post a link for sure. But it talks about finding joy in sad songs, more or less. And why do we feel like we always have longing and all of these things? And she explained it so brilliantly. She was saying there was a story of when she basically flipped her life upside down. She didn't get a partnership she wanted in a law firm, and that made her kind of open up her eyes to life not being what she wants, and broke up with a companion of 7 years, and she was kind of floating around. And she started a relationship with a musician, and she was enamored with him, and he was all sorts of wrong for her on every level, but she could not let him go. Like, she was just madly, madly obsessed with this man. And somebody had pointed out to her that the reason, and she knew it was wrong, but she just couldn't figure it out. But someone pointed out to her that the reason that she is so obsessed with him is because he represents something she's longing for. So figure out what your longing is. And she kind of sat on it and came to the realization that he was living the life that she'd always wanted. Not to be a musician. She wanted to be a writer, but to live the life that their creativity, their passions, their everything that they breathe, and the artsy fartsy part of them is who they are coming out, and they're actually making a living doing it, as opposed to all the shoulds and
Yeah.
following the path that
Living his
society tells
dream.
you to. Yeah. And that's when she was like, holy crap, he represents everything I ever wanted. And that's why I'm obsessed with him. The obsession stopped. She's like, all right, you're right. He is so bad for me. I'm going to become a writer when I grow up, and just changed everything. And that's when she started really focusing on her love of writing. And what it came down to is she was longing to write. There's a story in the TED Talk, and I'm going to put the link because there's a story in there that, and when you hear it, you'll see why I cried like a baby. But I'm not going to talk about it now because I'm not going to spoil it. The TED Talk talks about longing and finding joy in solace and finding happiness and quietness. And when you hear a sad song, listen to it, listen to your heart, and listen to the song. Is it really making you sad? Or is it sparking a little bit of joy because it's bringing some emotion out that it makes you just kind of awake of who you are, who you want to be, and taking the lead, right? So that's just, I don't know, Kelly, I'm rambling again, but this book and that TED Talk hit me like a ton of bricks. And I will be doing the exercises. I haven't done the exercises in this book, but listening to the book, I've thought about them in between chapters, and I found that they are very thought-provoking and they are very insightful, with practical advice and her personal stories and the insights from everybody else. I really find that this book empowers an introvert to find our inner tranquility, to nurture our own significant self, and to nurture relationships and find that purpose and joy in what is otherwise a crazy extroverted led world. And I'm telling you, like, this is going to be my new bedtime story book because I'll be listening to it over and over and over again, because it's at a point of, I'm at a point, sorry, of that own journey of self discovery, of it's okay to be the quiet one, which is going to be shocking because my husband would never believe it. Like, he doesn't understand. I tell him, no, I'm an introvert. And he goes, no, you're not. Well, maybe when I was 19, 20 years old and I lived for the energy of the nightclub, I'd rather sit alone in my backyard right now. That is just, that kind of energy
Yeah.
doesn't work for me anymore. It drains me. Just going to the office is draining. I love the job. I love the people, but there's just so many people, right? So I don't know.
Yeah. No, I totally hear that. I mean, as someone who spent a decade in the theater world, you're surrounded by natural extroverts, and that was
Yes.
never me. And I'm, I feel what you're saying because everyone has always, anytime I've said, "Oh, I'm an introvert," they're like, "What? No." Because once
No.
I'm comfortable, I'm
Yeah.
chatty and I'm friendly
Yeah.
and whatever, but if I'm new to a situation or if I just don't know you or whatever, I'm very shy.
Hmm.
And, even when I am comfortable and more extroverted, it does drain me, even if it also fills me up, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
It does. I mean, just because you're chatty when you're comfortable, that doesn't make you an extrovert. Like, that's what people
I
don't
know, but
understand.
exactly. I think
Yeah,
so much of it has to do with what gives you energy and what drains your energy.
exactly what it has to do with. Not so much of
Yeah.
it, all of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And people drain my energy. And it's not an on purpose thing, it's not a negative thing.
Right. It's
It's
not
just that,
about them being like good or bad or not enjoying
yeah,
spending time with them or whatever. It's just,
right.
yeah, most people take work. I mean, I hate to say it that way. And it's not that we're unwilling to do the work. It's just that, all
Yeah.
work and no play, right? I mean, you need downtime.
Right. And it's, I think as an introvert, downtime is important. It's that solace and finding, that happiness and that inner peace. For those who get that energy by going to the gym, that's their thing. They're like, I'm exhausted. I had a rough day at work, and this person yelled at me, and I stubbed my toe, and my life is miserable. I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to go work my butt
Yeah,
off
who
in
are
a
those
spin
people?
class with 32 people.
I don't
You know
understand
what?
those people, but they
Good for
probably don't
you.
understand me, so that's fair,
Yeah,
but I do not
that's just
understand that.
it.
I don't understand that.
Or,
And for
yeah,
me,
yeah.
when I have a day like that, I wanna go home, take a bath, and have ice cream for dinner. That's what I wanna do.
Perfect. That is a perfect evening. Perfect evening. My husband, he wants to go hang out with friends and just not like bar hopping or anything, but he wants to sit around and chit chat and play board games and, sit
Yeah,
around the fire and do all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, that is exhausting. I'm sitting on my fanny, talking to friends, having a glass of wine, drinking, having a good time. But at the end of the night, I'm exhausted. I'm like, I need to go to bed. I'm tired. He's
right.
like, woohoo, let's go have stuff. Let's go do things. And I'm like, let's not.
And let's
So
not do that
I
again for another week. Thank you.
a
Moving on.
week. Oh my gosh. A week.
If you guys wanna connect with us on social media, Jolene, do you wanna tell them how they can do that?
Sure. You can follow us on Instagram at Success Through Community or join our free or paid communities over at Patreon, which is patreon.com/STC Productions.
The best way that you can support the podcast is to make sure that you are subscribed wherever you're listening and leave us a review. That's the only way that new people will find and join our community. The Success Through Community podcast is hosted by Kelly Gable and Jolene Mills, and all episodes are solely the opinions of the respective host. Our sound production and editing is done by Kelly Gable, and all visual creative, including our logo, was created by Jolene Mills. The Success Through Community podcast is an STC production.